In this video, I hope to give the complete novice or beginner an insight to the world of radio, with some ideas for what they might expect to know. It's a general approach intended to give an overall view. Here you see the coherer. The coherer was a primitive form of radio signal detector used in the first radio receivers during the wireless telegraphy era at the beginning of the 20th century. Its use in radio was based on the 1890 findings of French physicist Edouard Branly and adapted by other physicists and inventors over the next 10 years. In this picture we see the crystal detector, otherwise known as the cat's whisker. This was shortly followed by the invention and development of the early valves or tubes. Invented in 1904 by John Ambrose Fleming, vacuum tubes were a basic component for electronics throughout the first half of the 20th century, which saw the diffusion of radio, television, radar, sound reinforcement, sound recording and reproduction, large telephone networks, analog and digital computers, and industrial process control. Although some applications had counterparts using earlier technologies such as the spark gap transmitter or mechanical computers, it was the invention of the vacuum tube that made these technologies widespread and practical.
You can see a few of the pictures. The first picture I've got coming up there on the screen, radio-wise, is the cat's whisker. Cat's whisker is a crystal detector, and it's made. This one is a galena or lead sulfide crystal detector. Other minerals were also used, such as silica, iron pyrite, molybdenite and carborundum. These things were used in the early days, and it's an electrical component used to rectify radio frequency alternating current. The asymmetric conduction of crystals was discovered in 1874 by Carl Ferdinand Braun, and the first crystal detectors were used to receive radio waves by Braun and Jagadish Chandra Bose in 1894 and improved around 1904 by other researchers. Crystal radios were most popular up until the 1920s and remained in common use up until the 1950s. In fact, when I was a small child, that's all I ever knew was a crystal radio. And the beauty of them were the fact that you didn't need a battery, it was free. And it was powered purely by the radio energy that was picked up in the antenna. And if you want to have a go at that, you can get hold of a little kit and make a crystal radio set, and you can use your own components. So that was the cat's whisker. That was followed on by the invention of the thermionic valve by Sir John Ambrose Fleming, FRH. He lived to a great age of 95. He was a member of the amateur radio club that I belong to, Exeter Amateur Radio Society. and he was a fellow of the Royal Society. So in the fact that he was made a fellow of the Royal Society put him in amongst other great names, people like Charles Darwin, Isaac Newton, Einstein, Rutherford, these fantastic minds that was noted for their great achievements. So he went on to be a great supporter of the Norman Lockyer Observatory at Sidmouth, which is still in functioning, and he died in 1945. So he was the man that invented those rather large valves that you see the pictures of there, and they're quite meaty things. They're capable of sending out signals using power up to, I think there's about 1500 watts, 1.5 kilowatts. Big valves like that are still used in transmitters today. So there is a place for them, and when they was invented, the crystal set sort of took a back seat. I mean, there was a lot of things going on there that made those improvements. I mean, you could use loudspeakers and such like, and much more to learn about, of course. Anyway, I'll stop that just at the moment and continue in a moment. Right, let's start at the beginning again, if you like. For the complete beginner or novice, as a general rule of thumb, to familiarise yourself with amateur radio, it's good to start listening. You can do that, of course, by having a radio receiver like I've got behind me here, or you can get a shortwave radio, which are not that expensive, or you can go on the internet and you can listen to operators on a site called websdr.org, which will allow you to go onto various repeaters that are situated around the world. In fact, there's several in this country, in the UK, but they're also quite popular around the United States as well, and other places. And what it is it's a setup which is picking up all the radio signals from amateur radios, and it's putting it out on the internet, which gives us that opportunity then to listen in, not only to our own signals that we send out, but when conditions are poor, when the radio propagation is not as good as it could be, and it hasn't been for some time, which is due to the effects of the sun and the weather that's created by the astronomical forces around the Earth and out there in the universe. So all these things come into play, but particularly the sun and its influence with the magnetic flux that it has on the Earth's atmosphere. And radio signals are being bounced off of the ionosphere. Primarily, that's how we manage to get our signal around the world. At different times of the day, it's being bounced off. It also gets bounced off of things like the moon and satellites, and so there's a whole plethora of things going on. A lot of amateur radio operators get involved with satellite and moon bounce and all sorts of other things. Slow scan TV, where you can send radio signals around the world for television pictures, and they get decoded, and there you are. So many things to do. So becoming an amateur radio operator opens many doors. Confusing for those that are just getting involved or thinking about doing it. There's a whole different language out there to be used, and you'll get confused, no doubt, when you hear things like 5 and 9 and QSO, QTH, all these bits of jargon, but they're all relevant, and they're all contained within the radio fraternity, which is an international and cosmopolitan group of people, men and women, young and old. And statistically there's more older people involved, but that is changing. And although I've talked about the coherer, the vacuum tube, and then of course it went on to the transistors, solid state, and now we've got the micro circuit boards. We're into nanotechnology, we're into all sorts of technical things that are coming along and advancing in science. So from the perspective of development and interest in other sciences, amateur radio goes hand in hand with it. A lot of people come into the hobby that are involved from all walks of life, but in the sciences, particularly astronomy. And there's a lot of ham operators that are up there in the space station, or have been. And Tim Peake was recently up there in the space station. I think he got involved with transmitting out signals there and making contacts with amateur radio operators, and that goes on, continues to go on. I think there's 2 million license holders throughout the world, and shortly there'll be some more, hopefully. I'm going to stop that video just a moment and I'll come back to it. So most of us, or at least some, will get into the hobby after having been a shortwave listener, in some cases for many years. The hobby has many facets to it, and not everyone has the desire or ability to be a good speaker. In fact, considering how shy I was as a young child, I often amaze myself to think that I can just chat without any inhibitions, as I'm doing now, talking to this camera. Of course, one has to be careful not to go too far and keep the broadcast within the realms of decency, and maintain proper radio protocol. And I'm a great believer in being precise and concise. We do, however, lapse into the waffle mode from time to time, and I make no apology about that, because I do just the same myself. But we do need to inject a little bit of humour into the hobby as well, but all hobbies have to be fun, of course. What are we doing? Well, there's a time to be serious, and on occasions a little bit more light-hearted. Now, coming back to the question in hand, getting a license and passing the exam. The younger you are, the easier it is, and it'll probably be often, after all, that the memory stays a bit fresher. Not always the case, and it depends on your motivation and dedication. but you have a better chance to pass your exam if you're younger. Statistically, the hobby is kept up by the older ones of us in the community, and my observation of that is it's when you've been around a while, you value the need of good communication, no matter what you're about in life. That's the philosopher of Phil coming out. But the old saying that you can't put an old head on young shoulders may have some validity. But by contrast, I've known stupidity in some people when they were young, and it's never left them. So you'll have to make up your own mind on that one. The point is, if you want to get a license, you have to put in some work to get it. This brings us on to what you need to know. Well, you need to know applicable regulations. These vary depending on the level of the license you are being examined for, and will often vary as well, depending on the particular country's requirements. So, I mean, my audience is worldwide here, so your own countries will have their own regulations, and you'll be learning to answer the questions about that. But universally, we have to know these regulations. In the United States, of course, this will be the FCC, Federal Communications Commission. In the UK, it will be governed by Ofcom. And as I say, other countries will have their own regulations. They're all governed, incidentally, by the ITU, which is the International Radio Regulations. So moving on, what else do you need to know? Well, you need to know about electronics. You need to know the basics to answer the foundation or technician class exam questions. What is electricity? How it is measured? Volts, amps, watts, the effects of resistance, and how all this comes together in relation to radio waves. And this is all within the electromagnetic spectrum. How we convert these signals to transmit and receive. So we need to know about the construction of a radio, its different components, and all these things you would pick up and learn as you went along doing your basic course, the training course that you choose to take up on. A lot of clubs will have someone who's dedicated to training. Not all clubs will have that, of course, at any given time, but you will generally find that there is a local club somewhere within easy reach that you can go along to, and they'll be running foundation courses or technician courses. And there's also, today, you can look in on the internet and you can get online courses. In the UK, for instance, the RSGB, Royal Society, Radio Society of Great Britain, runs courses and is a very good organisation for information, and freely available mostly there without becoming a member. So if you need to know a little bit more about something specific, there's Wikipedia or Wikibooks, which hosts a whole fantastic amount of information now available. So if you need to know something specific about a particular aspect of science, maths, or whatever it might be, those answers can be found quite easily, just the click of a mouse. So I would encourage you to use those facilities. Bit about the history and people that I feel deserve recognition. And we look back to the very early times of radio development and scientific understanding of how the electromagnetic spectrum manifests itself in relation to radio. So the law of induction, which was developed and conceived by Michael Faraday, who lived between 1791 and 1867, a long time ago now, we have to recognise for his contribution. And then there's George Ohm, who gave us Ohm's law, I equals V over R, an equation you'll get to grips with when you get to do your foundation course. Alexandra Volta, 1745 to 1827, the electric cell, voltaic pile. Credit him with that one. And there's people like Clerk Maxwell for Maxwell's equations and so much more. Albert Einstein for the theory of general relativity, and the most known for his mass energy equation formula, E equals mc squared. Henry Hertz, known for his electromagnetic radiation, photoelectric effect, and the Hertz principle of least curvature. Brain's going slowly. And then there's Guglielmo, I'd never say his first name well, Guglielmo Marconi, apologies to the Italians there, 1875 to 1937, and Carl Ferdinand Braun, 1850 to 1918, also invented the crystal diode rectifier, the cat's whisker that we saw in the picture earlier on, and built the first cathode ray tube. And I've already mentioned Sir John Ambrose Fleming, who invented the tube, the vacuum tube. Thermionic valve, which made great leaps and bounds in the use of radio and amplifiers, and still favoured by a lot of the purists today. There's something about listening to reproduction through a valve amplifier. Solid state just doesn't quite match it. Anyway, I digress. So with that, we'll take a break on that one. And just to make things a little bit more interesting for the video, I'm going to see if I can make a contact this morning on the Navy net, which is run by a chap called Glenn, G0GBI, who runs it from a club station in Bedford, MX1BED. And they're in their anniversary year, I think it's 60 years, their club, something like that, might be longer. First of all, I'm going to fire up the the SDR radio, because I know very well that the propagation's not going to be brilliant. That's when I can find the right site. I've only had this this particular computer running here for a couple of days, so I'm working on getting things sorted out. But I'm going on this particular site here, and it will come straight up. I'll bring you in a bit closer there. Hang on. And by manipulation there I can...
G4 Golf Tango X-ray, this is MX1, Bravo X Delta.
So instantly I'm...
Bravo X Delta, could you bring them a name? Go ahead. Yes, Glenn, Golf Lima, Echo, November, November. My own call sign is Golf 0, Golf Bravo India. Golf 0, Golf Bravo India. You'll see me up on QR there. Golf 4, Golf Tango X-ray. This is MX1, Bravo X Delta. Yes, from G4 GTX. Well, you're 5'9" plus up in Sunderland as well, so that long wire, that end head is certainly doing very,
you can see I'm keeping a paper log, which will be what I'll be looking back and referring to. And if I turn up the radio, today we can't get anything direct, so but I'm going to be calling in a moment and giving my call sign. And hopefully, although I'm not hearing on there, I will get my transmission out.
But nice to meet you there, and thank you for the report there. So I'll just hand it back to Golf 0 SFI, and I'll listen once round and then disappear. From G4 GTX. G4 GTX, GD0 SFI. Well, thank you, Stuart, and thank you for coming in.
Another call sign there. GD0 SFI, and that's Baz, and he's in the Isle of Man.
Every morning on about this frequency, or on 7068, give or take, as I say, QRM. But 10:30 every morning, Monday to Saturday, including Saturday, of course, and you're always welcome. We always welcome any strangers. You don't have to be a member of the Royal Naval Amateur Radio Society, and I'm sure you get a few calls if you stand by. But there we go.
Well, it's coming through, but there's a lot of noise on the signal, so it's much clearer to listen to here.
D0 SFI, D0 GBI. Yeah, okay then, folks. And we're using an FT840 at the moment. That ain't 0 watts. We don't run it flat out. Not very often. And it's matched by an FT.
And I'm just going to 50 watts, which I'm set at on the radio.
A lot of counterpoint there. Right, okay. Anybody else to join the bubbly rats net? This is MX1, Bravo Echo Delta.
2 Echo 0, Papa Charlie Juliet.
Okay. Hey, there's another station there. I'll come back to you in a second. C0, Oscar Kilo Alpha, MX1, Bravo X Delta. MX1, Bravo X Delta from C0. Okay, good morning.
And that's Dave, and he's in Torrington.
I'm not quite SDR on.
You me. Got to keep the voice clear.
coming out. Just had a heavy shower and the sun's clear and coming out now. Temperature 4 degrees. The pressure 1013. From G0, okay, G0, okay, MX1 Bravo, Echo Delta. Yeah, you're about 5 and 8 with us, direct there and stuff. Not cost you a lot of money this time, you know. No, we did see a little bit yesterday. We saw a little bit of flurry of snow as well.
Advantage of SDR is that I can see all the other signals that are being transmitted on this particular band. 2 Echo 0, Papa Charlie Juliet.
And there's another station there, I'll come to you in a second. I'll take the Roger G0 RNU. MX1 Bravo, Echo Delta. G0 RNU, returning to MX1 Bravo, Echo Delta. Morning, Glenn. It's a lovely sunny morning, isn't it? And I'll cold front. Yeah, very, very heavy QRM this morning, but I can reach you okay. And good morning today. Well, I can hear Dave from Torrington there. Nice to hear you, my friend. And the man from the island with 3 legs, Baz. Hello, Baz. I hope you're receiving me as well, mate. Nice to hear you there. Anyway, I'll wait my turn, Glenn, and thanks for allowing me up the gangplank. MX1 BED G0 RNU. G0 RNU.
As you can see, 3 times I've tried to get my call sign recognised, but sometimes you've got to be very patient. 2 Echo 0, Papa Charlie Juliet. Papa Charlie Juliet.
MX1 Bravo Echo Delta Golf 0 Lima Uniform Bravo. Yeah, good morning, Glenn, and good morning, Baz,
And this is Tony, and he lives in Melton Mowbray.
Quite well on 80 metres. Yeah, report here, it's cool, it's about 2 degrees, but no, it's nice and sunny, so yeah, I look out of the window here and I'm blinded by that great orange ball in the sky there. So yeah, pressure's about 10, 12, but looks like a lovely day, and hopefully the fears of snow and things like that have abated. So back to you, Glenn. MX1 Bravo Echo Delta, this Golf 0 Lima Uniform Bravo. G0 Lima Bravo, MX1 Bravo Echo Delta. Yep, fine business there. There was somebody else trying to call in. This is MX1 Bravo Echo Delta.
2 Echo 0, Papa Charlie Juliet.
2 Echo 0, Papa Charlie Juliet. This is MX1 Bravo Echo Delta. Yeah, so we're not too strong with me this morning, but I've got you. 2E0 PCJ, MX1 Bravo Echo Delta.
MX1 BED, this is 2E0 PCJ returning. Yeah, good morning, Glenn, and good morning to everybody on frequency and all the shortwave listeners. We've got a lovely sunny sky here in Exeter. It was -4 first thing, but I'm not sure what it is now. It's probably up about 2 or 3. Anyway, yeah, my signal's not that good this morning, Glenn. MX1 BED 2E0 PCJ over.
2E0 DJ, MX1 Bravo Echo Delta. Yeah, it's come up a bit now, Phil, come up a bit. So I can actually hear you. You're about a 5 and 5-ish, you're bearing 5 and 5 bearings there. Okay, anybody else to join the...
So I've got a signal report I'm transmitting, and it's 5 and 5, which is okay. He's hearing me, so can't do much about what's what, but conditions vary considerably. And the other station that's just come on is GVIX.
No problem, going T0, TBI, T0, VIX, yeah, I was put up with head cold, so I decided, okay, step until we get the central heating down there.
And he's in Southampton.
I'll see what it's like next week, of course, but I didn't fancy sitting in the cold today, that's a definite. Weather situation here is 3 degrees, plus 3 degrees, and the pressure is 1017. That's what we've got at the moment. And dare I say, a bright sunny day, but still damn cold. Signal reports, well, I'll go down the list. I won't make any calls this time around, but before I do, thanks, Henry, for coming back to my email. I appreciate that. And yeah, sorry about the Wednesday, but it's no
So there's another call sign I can write down. He's just mentioned Henry, which is M0 Zulu Alpha Echo.
To do that evening one. All the rest are okay. I can do, during the public rats and all that's no problem.
As you can hear, the noise level on the radio reception is not brilliant at all.
We don't want to start a civil war. Anyway, you're both 57 to 59 direct, and 5 and 9 on SDR, 5 and 9 plus on SDR. Baz 5 and 9 on SDR, no problem at all. Good morning to you, Brian with a Y, my 6 kilo Tango ZT, or 5 and 9 via SDR, no problem at all. Nothing on the radio, though. G0OKA, Dave, no problem, Dave. You're the strongest with me. You are 5 and 9 direct, and 5 and 9 via SDR. I'd always check your signal direct, because, I get a good pass down there, and it's a cracking signal, Dave, so no problem at all. Roger, G0RMU, you're about a 4 and 4 on the radio, 5 and 9 direct. Tony, about the same, 4 and 4 and 5 and 9 direct. And Phil down in the executor, 20PCJ. Nothing much on the radio, Phil, but don't worry about that. You're 5 and 9 on SDR, no problem. So there we are. Yeah, damn cold day, isn't it, Tim? I'm a bit fed up with this cold weather, but at least the sun's shining. At least the sun's shining, and it beats the rain. But I believe the prognosis is pretty poor for as regards rain then. Oh, the other gentleman's Sunderland, 5 and 9 via SDR as well, G4 GTX at the bottom. So back to you then, Glenn. I'll get this one out and I'll have a call next time round. G0 GBI, G0 VIO.
So you can see by the use of SDR how that enhances chances of listening to and running a net, which is, these guys are all in their late 70s, a lot of them, so they look forward to coming on the radio in the mornings. It makes a big difference to their social life.
Yes, Glenn's got shares in the fridge company.
And this is the Royal Naval Association net, the Bubbly Rats net, which runs 7 days a week, between 10:30 in the morning and 11:30 to midday. So, being an ex-Navy man, I try and get on here for a little chat now and again. I can generally make it 2 or 3 times a week if I'm lucky. Sometimes it's just on a Monday when Glenn is running it from his radio clubhouse in Bedford, and he uses the call sign MX1BED. They also have good facilities there with good antennas. And Henry, who's transmitting now, will be in the clubhouse with him. They spend the day there together, I understand, on occasions. He's given a signal of 5.9 on the SDR. And he is coming through on the radio direct, but there is someone who's causing interference there.
back into the net. I don't know why that's come out of there. It's still on the one that I sent out, but there we are. There we are. Right, Mike 6 kilowatt Tango Victor. Brian with a Y.
Another station, Mike 6 kilowatt Tango Victor. Brian with a Y. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So I think there's a 9 or 10 of us on the net at the moment.
Sorry, I didn't quite catch the name earlier on, but I don't think that you've ever watched the musical Buddy Holly. We love it. It's a radio station, ATV.
Right, I'm going to end that here now. You've got the idea of what's going on there. And this, of course, is just one element of amateur radio.
So, to conclude this video, I hope it's been of some use to you, or at least made you smile. I think the important message to get across is the fact that no matter where you are in the world, there will be someone around you that will help you get started into the hobby. And as you can see, it not only spans over 100 years, but still retains its early philosophy. We are a truly international brother and sisterhood. Regardless of whatever race, colour or creed you might be, we are all of a like mind and pursue the hobby of amateur radio not only for our own sanity, but for the help we give to others in times of need, whether it be social or in an emergency situation. So, to conclude, I will say 73, stay safe out there. Now clear. This is 2 Echo 0 Papa Charlie Juliet, signing clear. 7 3s.